Hello everybody, I'm doing my first tutorial ever. This is on combat in Final Fantasy XV episode Duscae. Now, we're really just going to go over some of the basics, and then I'm going to teach you how to use these crazy armiger things up here, but let's talk about slotting weapons before we get into anything too crazy. Depending on where you slot any of Noctis's weapons, there's going to be a different effect. The first slot is Crush. It's basically your opening weapon. You hit square and it's the first weapon that you'll attack the enemy with. After that you have Ravage. Hold down square and this will be your main weapon for the duration of your assault. Think of it as your primary weapon, but remember that it's not really your primary weapon, it's just the one that's being used during sustained attack. Vanquish is pretty much what it sounds like. If you have Lethal Force, this will be the weapon you use. I actually prefer to use something along the lines of the Partisan Wyvern Lance or the Greatsword in order to give me a little bit more reach. I recommend that if you really want to have a lot of effectiveness at reaching low HP enemies. Counter is the weapon you use when you dodge and then attack. Once again, very simple. And then last but not least, we have Descend. This is basically your jump attack weapon. If you jump, or if you're on a higher plane than the enemy you're attacking, this is the weapon you'll use. If you use these attacks properly, jump attacks can do a lot of crushing damage to your foes. So that's that. We're going to move on to some of the basics of offense and defense, and then we're going to talk about armigers. So here we go. The fundamentals of attacking in Final Fantasy XV are really simple. You find your target, or they find you, and your first attack is with your crash weapon. In this case, it's going to be our halberd. You attack with your crash weapon, and if you hold down square, you'll keep on attacking with your ravage weapon. Your other option is to use techniques. So you select a technique using the D-pad, and then you press triangle to use it. This can be anything from swinging your broadsword to a dramatic dragoon jump. One of the most useful skills that you'll have is actually a skill called Drain Blade. It'll restore health whenever you connect. Find the techniques that work best for you, and figure out the best times to use them in combat. It's not that hard. Turning into a strong, whirling dervish of swords is pretty much what this game is all about. Let's talk about the basics of defense. If you hold down L1, you'll go into a defensive stance. You'll dodge anything that comes your way. Now, if somebody has an icon over their head like that red icon here, if you press square, you can parry it and then follow up with an attack. One of the things that sort of bothered me about this game was that I thought there was no lock-on, but there is a way around that. If you lock on for your warp strike and then press R3, now you have a permanent lock-on to the character that you're facing. So now, if you're really careful, not many things are going to break through your defense. Noctis starts off the game with Armiger Akesuro. This is what gives you the warp strike, but it also gives you something called warp dodge. We're going to show these both off in action, and you'll sort of understand what's going on. Warp Strike is very simple. You lock on to your enemy using R1, and then you press X. And you'll be able to attack your opponent from anywhere on the battlefield. Like this. When you're in combat in the open world, look for places where you can warp to and then attack your enemy. There's actually a lot of areas in the world that you can do that. You just have to really keep a good eye out. You might warp into danger, but don't worry. Your friends are there to help you out. The other really important thing is warp dodge. If I press L1 and then circle, I can dodge in any direction I want to. This is a good way of bypassing any parry attacks that you don't have time to parry, and also a nice way of moving around the battlefield. It takes up MP though, so be careful. You can stay in the traditional defensive stance if you want, and have the, traditional dodge, but being able to dodge all the way around wherever you want is very useful, and it's something you should take full advantage of. Armigers' case is very, very powerful. If you have full MP and head towards your enemies and press L1 and R1 at the same time, you're going to summon a bunch of spectral swords. In this mode, any attack you use, any technique, does not consume MP, and then your Warp Strike turns into a powerful combo. Additionally, all your normal attacks are augmented by using almost every weapon in your arsenal, and you teleport around the battlefield really quickly, dealing a ton of damage. It's probably the best way to really do a large bit of burst damage against your opponents and easily clear up the battlefield. In order to show off Armiger Galantine, I need to get into a bit of combat with some Imperial soldiers, so here we are. Basically, if you're in a defensive stance, whenever they fire their weapons at you, you're going to block them using your magical swords. So here we go. Let's see how many of them are going to shoot at me. Block, block, block. Block. It allows you to move towards these soldiers with a lot of confidence. So I can close the gap, and even if people are shooting at me, I'll block, and then I'll automatically dodge as well. It's really empowering and pretty useful to use when you're exploring the open world. Armiger Rongomniad is probably the hardest to show off, so I hope I get it in this video clip. Basically, if you're knocked to the ground or hit by an enemy and you press L1, you are able to negate some damage and then get back up from the position on the ground. So we'll approach some of these enemies and hopefully some of them will attack us in melee. The trick here is to just get an opponent to attack me, and you see right there, that dodge, that's Armiger Rongomniad. It negated any damage that I was going to take. It's a little trickier to time than your normal dodge though, so don't rely on it too much, just maybe in one-on-one scenarios or in cases where you're feeling really confident or want to show off. And there we go. A really quick crash course on combat in Final Fantasy 15 episode Duscae. Now, keep in mind, you're not going to have access to all of these armigers right away. I'm not going to give away how to find all of them, but explore the world, complete some of the story, and you should be able to have all of these techniques at your disposal. After that, you can move about the landscape and fight to your heart's content. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Let me know if it helped you at all. Good luck out there.